Hello and welcome to this special broadcast. I am Nitin Gokhale. With me today is the Chairman of ISRO, Dr. S. Somanath, and he is speaking to us on a very special occasion. I am going to launch a new digital platform dedicated to the space sector in India and India's point of view in the space economy, the space world across the globe really. And with me today is Dr. Chaitanya Giri, who is going to be the editor of the new portal that we are launching. Its name is Interstellar.news. And we are about to launch this with this special interview with Dr. Somanath, the chairman of ISRO. Chaitanya, over to you.
Nitinji, thank you. Me on board as the editor of Interstellar.news. I am thrilled to be with you in this interstellar journey.
Thank you. So, Dr. Somanath, thank you for agreeing to do this. It's a very important journey that we are beginning, and we are privileged that you agreed to talk to us as we launch this new digital platform. So, looking at the space sector developments in India over the past 4 or 5 years, there is a lot of development, there is a lot of progress, there is a lot of discussions happening that, how it should be opened up to the private sector, how the ecosystem needs to grow. All other sectors have some regulatory body to regulate the sectors. In the space sector, while ISRO will remain the lead player, do you think there is a need for a regulatory body in the space sector?
Before I begin, let me congratulate you for launching Interstellar.news. I believe it will bring more focus on the activities in space and defense and related area where we are dealing with outer space, really.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
And now coming back to your question on the need of a regulatory mechanism in space sector, it stems out of the fact that it is not going to be a single entity's play now, it is going to be multi-entity system. So earlier the National Space Agency used to be the only player in most of the nations. It's a high-end technology. When it is developed, the investment will come only from government. So naturally in every ecosystem, the development took place in the governmental system, and slowly private people started doing it and they started developing it on their own. Wherever there are economies where the private and government coexist, there is a need of regulator. So here in India, we are seeing those changes happening. The new non-governmental entities are coming to space sector. They are going to work in this sector and also produce systems which will be operational, not simply into research. And when it starts operating, then we need to look at it various aspects of it. One of the important aspects is the global or the world commitments that as a nation that we are making, because we are signatory to various conventions in space, and so we need to make sure that the new actors also follow those conventions. Second is we have to ensure that there is a strong body of the government and a weak startup coming up, and they are not suppressed, never to grow up. And we also should encourage now everybody to come into this. And we realize that the economy of space sector cannot grow unless private participation is there. So there is a need to promote space activity in private sector. So we need to create a level playing field in which the governmental work, what should be done, public funded, private funded, what should be done, and where are the business opportunities. And business eye is naturally the private, never with the government. So realizing all these aspects, we are looking at the need of a regulator. Regulator is not going to control it. I think this we have to understand.
The word itself is good enough.
It should not be a misnomer.
Yeah.
It is a promoter.
Right.
It is also a handholder. It is also to ensure that there is a level playing field.
Oh dear.
Dr. Somanath, after the space reforms, we've seen a lot of interest coming for the space sector from a variety of professions. And most of these professions are seeking questions regarding capacity building. So how could lawyers, how could chartered accountants, how could people from the manufacturing sector, especially manufacturing which is not related to space and aerospace sectors, how could they come in? What are we doing for?
Traditionally, space sector has been a research scientist domain. Naturally, most of them came from that domain to develop the nascent technology. Once that was developed, then new people like applications sector people started coming in. Today, ISRO has people from agriculture, geology, water resources, fisheries, climate and weather, planet science. No, we have varieties of scientists in various domains. Now you are talking about a different domain like lawyers, policy makers, business, marketing people. And this change is natural thing to happen, because once you have reached a certain threshold of operability of systems to a business level, then all these actors will come. Now we know that space sector is not just an R&D and simply for scientific curiosity. It has a business intent. The business intent is to put objects in space, do communication, navigation, earth observation in the form of delivering certain output. It also looks at commercial exploitation outer space elements like space station, etc., for manufacturing, etc. They are also talking about going to outer planets and moon and Mars and mineral exploitation. So all of this, and it all comes into with an element of business approaches. So once business come, the policy issues start coming in, the regulatory issues happening, intergovernmental issues happening, legal issues start coming. So rooms for these people are already there. Writing a good policy document in space sector itself is a challenge for people like me. I am a scientist primarily. So we need support of people, lawyers, policy analysts. Then of course business people in terms of funding, for example, in space sector has been government funded. Now it's no longer going to be government funded. The funds will come from financial institutions, it will come from investors, and it will also from companies. And there will be models of private-public partnership, JVs, consortia, and many such things will be formed to finally produce results. For example, constellation of the future will never be built by ISRO. It will be built by operators funding it, NSIL doing it, ISRO giving technical support. So many actors will come together. And such formation of this requires financial intelligence. And unless you have the financial intelligence, you cannot collect money and do things and then do it in a manner which government approves. So even today, I have started consulting financial experts in this domain, and I am in process of entering into engagement with them to run a space agency itself. So you can understand that once it scale ups to really become business, it will be a corporate activity where research content will be definitely an important element. So new actors are welcome.
Right. And the intent that you spoke about sort of expanding the role of space sector. There is also a strategic intent always in space, which so far we have been only sort of confined to the strategic intent. This year, as we all know, the G20 and the presidency of G20 that India has, also of the SCO. In that respect, how is our, I'm sure ISRO is a lead player there. How is the cooperation with some of our friendly foreign countries? And what are we looking at in terms of cooperative mechanism to use space for various activities?
So your question contains two separate elements. One, of course, related to strategic intent and how do we really look at space as an asset for national security. I think this role is well understood now, everybody. We have been doing it as a separate activity till now, that you build some satellites and platforms to support the strategic sector. But now the thin line between strategic sector and civilian sector is also vanishing. You can observe the world happenings, events happening today, unfolding in front of us. The civilian sector is actually the player behind what our strategic activity is actually happening. So one thing we have to understand that every spacecraft we launch is a strategic asset. Whether it is for a commercial purpose, it is for communication, it's for education, it's for banking. All these are strategic assets. Banks are strategic assets. Okay. Our railway network is a strategic asset. Our airport network is a strategic asset. So whatever is supporting those civilian networks becomes a strategic asset, and we need to protect them. So that means every spacecraft, every space infrastructure need to be secured. So security of this becomes an important issue. So space asset security becomes important. For this, we need to have watchdogs. We need to continuously surveil it. And if there are events which are observed, then we need to take corrective actions. And also we need to have observational systems to handle security of this. We should also have methods by which you cannot do soft modes of attacks, which includes the spamware or spoofing or all sort of things, and soft and hard weapons usages in this domain, how to protect them, how to create a defense mechanism also in this intent. All this becomes part of the space activity. It is not separate from the space activity. It's an inherently now interwoven into it. So this is the first part of it. Second part is about the engagement with the G20 nations and how we collaborate. I think here again we understand that the collaboration is definitely in the technology domain today. It has never been into the domain of either the civilian sector, strategic sector, business, etc. We have never separated. But now look at the domain of scientific engagement, which we happen to have with many space agencies and nations, and acquiring technology, developing jointly, building some satellites for common use, common good of the nation, like climate, weather, natural disasters, sharing information, etc. This is one domain of work of cooperation between G20 nations. Another domain is looking at enabling somebody who has not capability in space to create the next step. And that we are discussing with people who have an intent, neighborhood who have an intent to come up in the sector. How do we really share our expertise, knowledge, and help them to come up? We are engaged with Bhutan, we are engaging with other nations, Sri Lanka, and many other nations around it to help it. We also see a potential to collaborate with the South Asian countries of many nations, or even towards the Arabian countries. We can create a consortia to help this activity, being a leader in this domain. So I see G20 becomes a good platform, but there are of course stronger leaders there. So in which how we can play our role is definitely there as part of the G20 dialogue.
I'm sure that is happening.
But Somanath, coming back very specific to ISRO. ISRO all these years, the assets that we see in your backdrop, they've been developed for decades, very many thousands and lakhs of human hours invested. All these was developed when India was planning over a span of only 5 years, the 5-year plans. Now, after 2022, Prime Minister Modi, when he says that we have to start preparing for the Amrit Kal, which is the 25-year-long period. Now, that is something where ISRO has strength. It is your strength. So, how do you see a longer duration planning helping an agency like ISRO?
No, it definitely helps. One of the important approaches in ISRO has been always preparing long-term plans. We have been preparing long-term plans internally. Of course, government's plans are always 5-year plans as far as budgeting is concerned. So, whereas in technology, there is nothing like 5-year, 10-year. Technology changes slowly in the past, but it changes fast in the present. So, we need to understand this and then account for it. For example, a satellite built yesterday had life of 15 years. Now, today we understand that 15-year life is too much for a satellite. It is better to build it for 5 years, because in 5 years, it becomes another technology that now very fast it is changing, communication revolution. Even the Starlink satellites which are launched now for mobile access, internet communication is actually outdated in just 2 years. So, and new satellites new approaches are coming. So, let us understand that here, long-term planning has definitely an advantage. Now, coming back to the Amrit Kal and the Modi's vision for 25 years. Here, he has a different vision. His vision is in 25 years, we must be somebody. So, in the space sector and many other sectors, this point is very clear. Some of those goals that he has very outlined, and he asked all of us to create that long-term vision. So, we have created that. In space sector also, we have created a 25-year vision document that is already shared with them, and we are having to have further reviews on it in different sectors. And we are focusing on how our overall economy of space sector can grow. This becomes one of the important measure of the growth. Unless we create that scale of activity, which is today it is a government funded activity, can it become tenfold in terms of scale of economy? Then naturally activity will take place in everywhere. Research will be supported, manufacturing will grow, support services will grow, it will deeper penetration into various actors including villages, and every sector will grow. So, one of the measure is scale of economy of space sector. Second is in terms of share of space activity of India with respect to global space activity. So, there is a total size of the global economy is something like 440 billion US dollars, in which we have hardly 2%, less than 2% share. Can this 2% share be 10% by the end of 25, or even 20%, or even 50%? If you have to fix a number, whether it is achievable in over a period of time, what steps we need to take towards in 25 years to reach that scale. So, we have at least outlined all these steps in various domains and said that it is possible for us to actually claim a creditful thing. And we know the other nations are also going to put similar wish list, and in which a competitive environment, how do we really work? And this wish list we have created, and we will work towards that.
So, talking about the wish list, Dr. Somanath, there is also this particular program for lunar exploration. And India is not part of any of the alliances, the two alliances that we know. So in that respect, how's the progress and what are your estimates? Where are we at the moment?
So you are talking about the Artemis program that US is leading as far as building the moon gateway is concerned, and then continue to produce missions to moon and then use moon as a base for future planetary exploration.
All that, yes.
This is one program, and there is another Chinese
Yes,
program.
China, Russia
Of course,
program.
Russia may also be part of it and then may grow it. Maybe other models will evolve. Okay. Now, for India, we have not taken a stand on what should be our stand on Artemis program. Artemis program calls for cooperation in terms of making use of that gateway. By jointly developing systems, India can also become a partner at any point in time. One of the things we are making sure is we are having dialogue with them right now and see how we can ensure interfaces are common.
Yes.
Suppose I develop a human craft tomorrow, can it really go and dock there? Whether communication protocol, mechanical interfacing protocol, electrical protocols are one and the same. And they are ready to share that information, and we will build such a way that even if there is no agreement, we can ensure that long term that compatibility will exist. But more than this, there is another issue of being partner in that. This issue we need to discuss in deeper, because we need to understand what are the outcome out of that engagement. If there is a tangible outcome that we are going to get by associating with one of these approaches, then definitely we can be a partner. And it requires certain funding from our side. Our industries share in that activity. How much of that work of that overall program comes to India, and India will be manufacturing and supporting. Now, all these questions are there to understand the overall scale of this. First step is to understand in the policy level. For example, look at Artemis Accord. Artemis Accord is an accord which is a prerequisite for being a part of the Artemis program. So we have not signed that even now. So we have to first make a view whether it is appropriate for India to sign Artemis Accord, which is a US-led accord. Basically, they have drafted it and everybody is signing it for them, and it produces certain framework on which how future exploitation of other outer planet objects will be done. Do we agree with this, or do you want to sign it, and what are the results of such a signature? We have already formed a thought process within the department, and I am going to submit soon a report to Government of India to take it forward. So definitely, I am hopeful of some really positive outcome of it. I can't disclose it right now.
That's true. But you were there in the US recently. I'm sure you had conversations there under the ICET also. I suppose it would have been there.
This question every time comes up. Why you are not signing Artemis Accord? Of course, we need to take a stand here. We are signing, why you are not signing? And due to such and such reasons, we will take such a stand.
Absolutely. So you spoke about Artemis, the Chinese efforts. There is also a race that is coming up between who launches the most number of satellites in terms of constellations. You had the American counterpart, yes, the Western counterpart saying that we'll launch thousands, tens of thousands of satellites in the low Earth orbit or in the MEO. Likewise, on the other side, the Chinese team similarly. Now that leads to some sort of disturbances in the orbital environments, and one needs to be very careful because again, that is considered by many as a common heritage. And for that very purposes, we have started in India a space situational awareness program.
Yes.
And only recently we have deorbited
Megatropics, yes.
So what are your views on space situational awareness and how it would grow in importance?
See, this emergence of this MEO, LEO large constellation is a recent technological change, in which you can communicate with the low latencies. Communication networks can be established through large number of satellites for handheld devices, etc. And this created the OneWeb and the Starlink constellations. Of course, others people may follow, Chinese may follow, and other business networks may come up. But I can tell you that there are competitors to it in much lesser number of satellites. They are able to manage the same, provide the same services with a lesser number of satellites. Concepts like that have emerged. Now, we'll have to see whether this constellation will survive for another 20 years like this. Will they add more satellites and expand it, or there will be competitive constellations which will come up to remove this all on a sudden. So, the evolution of technology is such that you can predict either way. Examples are there already in front of us. So, now let us understand one thing very clear. Number of satellites are going to grow up in numbers because access to space has been really now increased. The cost of access to has come down, and so more small satellites will be built, and more number of satellites will be built due to various reasons. So that means the cluttering of the outer space is going to happen. Now this puts us a condition that regulation of this cluttering and space traffic management becomes an important activity. So that every space agency is now putting a lot of effort on space traffic management. The first and foremost is observation, understand where they are. Today the observation platforms are limited. So only US, Russia and some capability in private are only existing. It may expand in the coming days, large number of radar networks, computational infrastructure to predict these numbers will come. But even then, it is limited to only 26,000 of satellites. But there are few lakhs of objects which are still smaller and untraceable, which is a threat to everybody. So what we need to do is to control the production of smaller particles, smaller objects which are untraceable by regulating the satellites that you should not explode. It should be re-entered after the life is over. You should not cause orbital collisions. So if you create this, again thousands of components will be generated. So to do that, then you need to have a stronger observation. Then every defense satellite must be forced to deorbit so that that conditions are created. For that, there are different projects running. One is when a functional satellite is over, then how to go there and do servicing satellite. Many projects are started running in various companies. Second is to create additional capability within the satellite to, in case it becomes non-functional, you can trigger another supporting system so that it can be deorbited. And I believe that in the few days, few years from now, stronger regulations will come, globally acceptable regulations. That means all satellite builders will be forced to adopt those regulations, an integral part of the satellite building, so that this menace can be controlled. But I am very sure that in few years from now, the threat of this is actually going to grow up substantially, and you will reach a situation that there is no, we will really face the big threat, then everybody will wake up and then try to come down. It will be like that only. See, because the long-term predictions, people don't take it. Today there is no issue, no, we are happy with it. But the imminent threat is very visible for everybody. So it is up to the all space nations and agencies to take this call seriously and go to global fora, create regulations so that you don't do it in a very irresponsible manner.
So I suppose you can take the lead, ISRO can take the lead on
we want to show through the megatropic experiment. It was simply a show of our intent to do this. You know, it was only a possibility that we could do in megatropics. Megatropic was still functional, so we could command it. We could suppose assume that electronics is dead. What would we have done? We couldn't have done anything. There was enough fuel and electronics was healthy. We did the planned orbital maneuver so as to train our own people to do how this to be done on an unplanned satellite and demonstrate the world that it is something that you must work on. So I believe the message is loud and clear. Loud, yeah.
Absolutely. One final thought from me, and then I think Chaitanya will have one more thought. Because space application has now become so wide, agriculture, railways, you mentioned all of them. The private sector is also now taking a lot of interest. India seems to have a sudden rush of startups in this sector. What would be your suggestion to them, if not advice?
No, it's always very exciting to see young people trying to come with new ideas and trying to create small companies, capturing investors, having their confidence in it to showcase, and then slowly developing a startup ecosystem, which is not only in space sector, every sector in engineering, non-engineering domain, it is happening in India. It's one of the emerging startup economy in India. Specifically into space sector, realizing that these people are coming, we have the InSpace which is hand-holding them, and ISRO is there to support them. But I would like to tell you that the real thrust area, I believe, is still in the downstream sector, where there is risk levels are low, investment is low, returns are high. So basically, if you create a stronger user segment and downstream applications, it will drive every upstream applications. If you create a launcher, it doesn't create the market. So the market creation is by the users. So we must focus, every startup system should, startup or any business entity must first focus on developing the user segment and then create a demand there to create the building of the satellite. And once satellite started building, you will look at low cost operation, the launching. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can start the launcher later. So, but I see the rate of growth of the sector will be much higher in the application side. So the least risk and high return possibilities are there, and contrary to the other two sectors. So I think we need to focus on all of them. And startups who have a potential, working in launcher, for example, has a high risk. becoming successful is actually very difficult. You know that knowledge level required is very high, and potential of failure to handle them and come back is also very difficult. Then the support required is from outside expertise is very, very high. So considering all of this, there is a high challenge. It's a big challenge for them to come out. Maybe they may launch few, but to become an operational rocket to produce a profitable launch business is difficult. But when you look at satellite, it becomes much more easier. But this will run it long term only when that you create market outside India. India has a certain amount of market, but the Indian market alone won't drive the satellite building economy. But unless you grab a possible external markets, small satellite building industry will not grow. Whereas application segment, I can tell you there is sufficient market within India unexplored.
True, it's very valuable advice, but
So my last question is, many times when you look at some of the Western space missions, you've seen that the payloads that are built in their universities or in their research laboratories, they usually get spun off easily into the markets. So it may not be the space and aerospace market, but they might go, let's say, into the automotive sector or into the defense sector and whatnot. So there's a great role for academia and industry to play simultaneously. Now, what are the measures that we are taking and that ISRO is taking to make sure that many of these initiatives are taken up and they work autonomously on their own, with ISRO just showing the direction?
No, you said it right. All those developments that are taking place in academia in the West has a high acceptability in industry for converting into a useful product. Whereas it doesn't happen here earlier. But the things are changing now. I think you must understand that. Yes. I recently had a display in Indian Institute of Science in the lab, in the SENSE lab. You could have watched how many new startups have come out of the technology which was developed internally in terms of products, which goes into the market very fast. Now, keeping aside, the real crux of the problem is to understand what the industry needs and do the research accordingly in an academic institution. The open-ended academic research, which has no connect with the demand of the industry, is the problem we are facing in many of the academics.
That's not practical enough.
Yeah, and there is a need, people moving back and forth from industry to academia and academia to industry is a natural process in the West, whereas it is not acceptable even today in India.
There's no revolving.
Yeah. So what do you need essentially? That professors in universities should be allowed to go to industries, and industry captains should come to take up academic positions.
Right.
Or rather, the professors should be allowed to incubate companies, they become company owners. No, it is happening now. So I have seen professors in IITs are now owning companies. They are not taking salary from government. They are running startups in the companies. It's a welcome change.
Sure.
And only through this process that you will understand that all what you are doing research is to produce something tangible outcome ultimately. Of course, there are research which happens for no tangible outcome. That is the pure research. And we must promote that. Unless you have the fundamental knowledge, the applied research will not happen. So it is important that government looks at all these sectors separately, doing fundamental research to create the knowledge, to create, and based on the knowledge, the applied research will happen. So all these grow together. And meantime, you have to also create R&D activities in industries also. Today, investment by R&D, industries into R&D is actually very small. So one of the guidelines I believe that government should make is industries must compulsorily invest in R&D.
Certain percentage can
certain percentage like the corporate social responsibility. They must create R&D institutions, or they must invest in the good institutions for conducting R&D to make to support their R&D and move people back and forth from academic to industry. So they should create collaborative work in institutions like higher learning and create the lab for that industry in the premises of that academia. Cool. So that this creates feed to it really. So unless you do, and many good models in the West work in that way.
That's a great way to end this conversation, Dr. Anna. Thank you very much for your time. Viewers, we couldn't have asked for a better launch, better than getting the ISRO chairman and speaking to us and giving us a wide insight into the space sector. So do keep watching Interstellar.news. We'll come up with more and more industry-related, space sector-related news analysis. Also doing some discussions. We'll be covering a wide range of activities in this sector. So your suggestions are welcome. Your feedback is always welcome. And we hope to be of use to the country's space sector and looking at the world from an Indian point of view. Thanks for watching. Goodbye from